It's okay. Okay, can you hear me? Somebody nod.
Raise your hand.
Wave your hand, Teeny. Oh, she's nodding. Okay. Everyone, I'm so sorry. Our conference room computer is not used very often and it started a Windows update at 5 o'clock. So my apologies for that. I will let Jeannie start things and I'll pull up my presentation.
Okay, excellent. Well, thank you everyone for attending. Thank you everyone who is attending via Zoom. This is intended to be an informational meeting, a workshop for the commissioners, for the 3 commissioners. As such, it's not intended for, we're not going to provide public comment. That has been done in the past. It might be done in the future, but not at this site. So with that, if you 3 could introduce yourself to the group, I would appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Sorry.
Oh, let's see. That's not the way I was gonna do it.
So I'm Ken Van Boris, I'm a landscape architect with SBVD Landscape Architects, and we're consultants with Anderson Perry, helping them out with this project.
And I'm Adam Schmeckoff from Anderson Perry. I'm one of the consultant engineers on the project.
Thank you.
And I'm Brian Hansen, also with Anderson Perry. I'm an engineer on the project.
Okay. I'm gonna let you let people in. Okay. I thank you everyone and my apologies for that. That'll never happen again, I swear, for the rest of my life. We learn lessons at all ages, don't we? Okay, so tonight we are going to share, you know, it might be some repeat information from the informational meeting we had in the spring, but most of it is more of an update. So it's kind of a, you know, a little bit of half and half. So I'm going to share a little bit first. I'll show you the meeting. Oh, let's see. Nope, I'm going to have to touch it.
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to share, this is basically the format of the outline of the meeting. I'll share some background, why the port took on the project, the planning process, the economics, the contracts we have in place. Anderson Perry will share the site survey and document research work, design, 30% design, 30% design meeting, some of the feedback we've had and adjustments we've made because of that feedback, and then current funding opportunities. And then we have time for questions at the end, but of course, if you want to stop in the middle, you can, but we're trying to leave time at the end for plenty of questions if you have them. Okay. So first we'll start with background. I'm going to not try to belabor to this too much, but starting in about the mid 2000s, we have a group that meets monthly. It's an economic development steering committee. And we kept hearing from people, they kept placing more paths and trails in the community on their priority, what they wanted to happen in the community. And of course, this was way before this concept ever came about, but people seemed really interested in more paths and trails. In 2015 and I think 2016, trails were, we take an informal vote each December when we have our planning meeting. It's community leaders, business owners, nonprofits, anyone who attends, who wants to attend can, and we just do an informal vote that just kind of tells us what people are thinking that they want us to work on. And in both 2015 and 2016, trails were voted as one of the top 3 things that people wanted. And then in I think it was between 2016 and 2018, Blue Mountain Regional's trails planning took place. And that was actually a group from Milton, Freewater, Walla Walla, and Dayton. That's what's kind of considered the functional economy of the region. They did a big workshop and planning action for the region. And we had a workshop, one of the workshops was in Dayton, it had about 100 people attending. And after a year of workshops, I would say is when they had a exercise where you could go around the room and place your dot by the project you thought was the most, I don't know what the word was, the most feasible and the most they thought should start with first. And the Dayton to Waitsburg Trail was first. And if you ask anybody at the time, this was not what I thought was priority to work. I mean, I just couldn't believe it, that trails were so important, but people really seem to care about it. And because we own the railroad right of way, I think that had a lot to do with why people thought it might actually happen. So that was when we really kind of started work on it. You want to push it to the next page? Thank you. Did we have support? So at the time that all this planning was taking place, a lot of the municipalities were working on their 10-year updates to their comprehensive plans. And we also have a cooperative parks master plan that is a joint effort of the city, the county, and the port. And all of the plans that you see listed up there include a section that shows support for the trail. So we really felt like we had a directive from the community to work on the trail. That's why we did it. And for each of these comprehensive plans, at least one public hearing was held before adoption of any of the above documents. And in the case of the parks plan, there were 3 public hearings held, 1 at each entity. Okay, next slide. So this one, my friends from Anderson Perry were telling me I made a mistake on. It was actually 2018 is when we submitted an application to the Washington State Department of Transportation for trail design funds. And at the time of that funding application, we received support letters from all of the entities listed on the screen. Columbia County Board of Commissioners, Walla Walla County Board of Commissioners, cities of Dayton and Waitsburg, the Palouse Regional Transportation Planning Organization, Walla Walla Valley Metropolitan Planning Organization, Waitsburg Commercial Club, the DOT Regional Planning Department, and the Community Council. Next slide. And we also at the same time submitted an application for technical support valued at about $100,000 to the National Park Service. And 2 team members pulled together professional landscape architects and a WSU landscape class of students. And we held a design charrette and finalized a concept plan. Community members were asked to give input during the design charrette, and we got some really good input. And Anderson Perry has used that concept plan as a guide since it was developed. Next slide. So when we started the trail planning process in June of 2019, we did landowner outreach. We sent letters to the adjacent landowners, inviting them to meet with engineers and port staff. We got the list of names from the county GIS map. In September of 2019, we held 2 public information meetings. In October, we did the design charrette and the public meetings. In December of 2020 is when we entered into a formal contract with Anderson Perry to design the trail. In March of 2020, the concept plan was complete. And let's see. Oh, I've got my dates out of order. January of 2020, the design and engineering began. And in April of 2021, we held a public information meeting at the 30% design stage. And that meeting was recorded and is on our website if anybody would like to view it. Next slide. So I will tell you at that time, I was really quite surprised at the frustration that we heard from the public. Because I really had been hearing from people for years that they wanted trails. So that's why we had gone about it. And we invited the community into the planning process early. And I think that caused some frustration that we didn't have answers, but we just didn't have them yet. You know, we needed to go through the design phase. So this process has helped us answer most of those questions. All right, next page. So why build a trail? If you've been to any of the other meetings, you'll see that there's lots of reasons to build a trail. But from the port's perspective, to me, this is why we build a trail, is to bring new visitors to Dayton to spend money at our stores, hotels, restaurants, and businesses. It's for economic development to help our towns. Next slide. Proposed economic development economic benefits. We had an economist do a forecast of potential economic impacts in 2021. Based it on trail numbers from other communities, because we don't have trail numbers yet from other rural communities. And the forecast shows positive economic impacts from both the temporary construction jobs as well as visitor spending after the trail is complete. They estimate that about 22% of users would come from outside the region. And what the region is defined as is stretching from Walla Walla to the Lewiston Clarkston area. So about 22% would be from further than that. And each visitor party is estimated to spend about $72.66 while they're here. And that would be on lodging and eating and dining and gas and whatever. And even if you don't believe the numbers in this particular study, which I have heard that, there are many regional, state, and federal studies that show the positive economic impacts of recreation in general and trails in particular. So I really think, you know, I think it would draw people, and it would create economic benefit. It is a lucrative industry that the port can take advantage of and aid our sustainability in our town and our neighboring community. Okay, next page. So I know that there's been questions about why a port would do a trail, and I thought that I would compare it just a little bit to Lions Ferry Marina. The port operates Lions Ferry Marina. It is located on a U.S. Army Corps of Engineers property, and we started developing that facility in the 1970s when they were starting to construct the Snake River dams. And the purpose was to try to maintain access to water for the public. The public was concerned about what would happen when the dams were built and whether or not they could still recreate on the river. So that was why the port was involved. And we used funds from the state, such as the RCO, which is the Recreation Conservation Office, to build some of the infrastructure there, some of the buildings. Can you admit that person? Sorry.
Nope, sorry.
It creates an opportunity for a private sector operator. So we lease it to a private concessionaire, and they create jobs, and it brings a lot of outside dollars into Columbia County. And the port does contribute $20,000 a year to help maintain the facility. And the reason for that is it's very difficult to make money on a marina. Most of the marinas around the state are, if they're port operated, they're kind of more break-even opportunities. You can make money on the RV park and on the store and on the restaurant, but it's really difficult to maintain infrastructure on the water. So we do contribute that, and we have a line item in our budget for that. And so it's similar to the trail in that we would be working with other municipalities like we did with the Corps of Engineers. We would use funds from the state and the RCO and WSDOT. Purpose would be to provide a recreational facility, bring visitors and outside dollars to our two small towns, support businesses, create economic activity, provide opportunity for recreation business development. And our estimate is we would contribute about between $20,000 and $25,000 per year to maintain the trail. Next slide. And this is just for fun, show you the Lions Ferry. You can see, let me touch the little pointer. So you can see this is the breakwater out here. And then we have covered moorage. It has about 84 slips in this area. There's a store and restaurant. There's a full RV park. There's camping, partial RV, and a couple of upland restrooms. It's a public water system, a public septic system, and pretty cool place. It's enjoyed by a lot of people from the region. Okay, next slide. Okay, so, and then I wanted to just show for you guys, I think we've already gone through this a little bit. I'll make it pretty quick. But from our comprehensive plan, the areas that show that we have a focus of recreation as one of our core lines of business. These are our 4 core lines of business, and recreation is one of them. Then under economic development, we have this is from the strategic plan portion of our comp plan, and it says we will support tourism, recreation, and historic preservation, promotion efforts to increase the number of visitors and new residents to the county. This is the real estate section. I don't think there was anything there that had to do with trail. And then we have a recreation section, says continue design and engineering of the Touchet Valley Trail with an eye toward construction. And then transportation, support regional active transportation planning, walking, biking, and water trails. So that is just my little quick overview of why we planned the trail. And now I will let Brian.
Sure. That was great.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing
I will start.
and let you share. I don't have to
Jen,
see
I have
it.
a question.
Sure.
If we have people commenting in the chat, do we have to
Oh.
let anybody comment?
We should stop. We should disable. Yeah, we should disable the chat. I'll disable it.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't want to do that. We're going to disable the chat, everybody, because this isn't a public comment meeting. I swear we need a bigger TV.
That's who they're sending to. Maybe
Oh, the three dots.
Yeah. Maybe click there.
No one, there.
It doesn't restart the computer.
Stop it.
No.
Thank you, Seth. I appreciate that. Okay, you go ahead, Brian.
Okay, whoops, I'm supposed to share the screen. How about that? All right, I'm Brian Hanson with Anderson Perry. And the first part of what we want to talk about, Jenny had the slide up there, but I took it over, is when we came on board, the first piece of work for us was to prepare an aerial survey and aerial photography of the project, the 10-mile length of trail, and also then a records search for determining where the port's right-of-way is. So I'm showing a part of one page of the 30% plans, and we'll get to why that's up there in a second. But so the very beginning, spring 2020, a firm out of Eugene called Geo Tierra flew the length of the trail, and the imagery that you're seeing in the background here is the result of that. And then I'll zoom in because
Can you make your page full screen up there?
well, if I make it full screen, it shows the whole sheet.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
All right,
so this
okay,
is, sorry,
that's
this is
fine, that's good.
this is one sheet of the design plan, so I'll zoom in a little bit, but you can see the flight also surveyed the contours of the area, and so that is the background at which the design plans are being built on, this aerial photograph and topographic data. They also picked up, you can see the existing rail line is here. That was all part of the aerial survey. And then to augment that, Anderson Perry and our survey crews went out and collected data on any property corners we could find, section corners, basically survey monumentation along the length of the trail that was necessary to locate the right-of-way and the project in space. Following getting that information, we reached out to Title I in Dayton, who has done all of this title work pro bono. Our estimate is that it's somewhere between $20,000 to $30,000 worth of title work. We have several hundred, 300 plus documents that Title I has provided along the length of the trail to help determine what the existing right-of-way is. And so the current right-of-way is defined in two different ways. Originally, there were two railroads that have been combined into one railroad, and that's what the port got from the UP. That original right-of-way was a dimension off of the physical rail line. So that dimension originally was 50 feet either side of the center of the rail. And so, as you can see in this section that I picked out in the middle, this is near Chandler Street, just down the street from Blue Mountain Station. This is a section where that right-of-way matches what the original right-of-way was, 50 feet either side of the trail. I will jump to a different spot in the trail. And you can see this section of trail has a right-of-way that looks substantially different than 50 feet on either side of the trail. So this is the result of the property research and documentation. The right-of-way, as you see, has a fair amount of jogs in it, and that could be, in this case, could be right-of-way deeds where the railroad at some point decided that they didn't need as much right-of-way, and they either sold it back to the neighboring property, or they vacated part of the right of way or transferred the right of way, or where the railroads combined the right of way change. So you'll see throughout the 30% plan set and basically our survey map that the right of way changes from 50 feet either side of the railroad to shapes that look like this. And the intent, our intent has always been to take the best information that we can get, which is the old railroad maps, the title searches, and take all of that data and produce a right-of-way line that is the best representation of the data that's out there. We've had multiple public meetings at this point, and at each one of those public meetings, and even at this meeting, we've said, you know, if someone out there has documentation that they feel like the line that's depicted on the 30% plan, which is up on the port's website, it's been up there since last April, is incorrect, we would be happy to have that information so that we can review it. And if it's a deed or something that we didn't get from the title report, our mission is to put a right-of-way line together that is based on the best information. So if we're missing something, we don't know that we're missing it. We've gathered the best information that we can. And so this right-of-way map, and then the aerial photography and the topographic data is what the whole 30% plan is based off of. Generally, what you'll see is some combination of the first slide I showed where it was 50 feet on either side. This is maybe the most interesting piece, which is why I put it up here. So that's how the right-of-way has been determined and what you're seeing in the 30% plans. I guess the other piece that I'd like to point out is that where we have property lines outside of the right-of-way in these plans, that's all based on the county's GIS, and GIS is an approximate representation of what property lines are supposed to look like. If you look at the county's GIS and you look at the right-of-way lines, they don't line up, and that is because GIS is an approximation. It isn't an actual surveyed boundary. The same is to be said for the parcels on either side of the right-of-way. So we're using the GIS in the 30% and in all of our design drawings to show approximately where people's properties are. All that information is coming straight from the county, but it's not an official survey of those properties.
And I was gonna ask you though, most of I mean, there are these funny places with the jogs,
Yeah.
but lots of it is straightforward.
Lots of it is
Yeah.
straightforward.
Well, and I was also gonna say that there was a property, division, what were they doing? Remember that when I asked you guys if you had this information? Somebody was, I think a family, there'd been a death and they were separating property
Subdivision.
and they called and they were thrilled to have this because the railroad is so hard to sort out property lines. So the county planning department was really happy that we had done this.
Right. So that's a little background on, well, the design plan background, the right of way, and I will jump right into kind of what we shared on the 30% design. We've made progress from then, but it's a good jumping off point. But I think the best way to, I'm gonna stop sharing this, to talk about the trail is actually to share Google Earth and just walk down the trail and talk about where it is, what some of the main points along the proposed trail are, before we jump into the 30% design plan. Because it's 10 miles long, it's chopped into a bunch of sheets that aren't the easiest to follow along with. So I thought that this would be the best way to share kind of the overall plan of the trail.
And before you get too far into this though, what was the result of your property searches? I mean, did you find any
Yep,
places we don't own the land?
we did not. We did not find any places along the trail where the port doesn't can have continuous ownership along the railroad. It narrows in some portions, it narrows down to, I believe, 20 feet on one side, but there's always a continuous port right of way from Waitsburg to Caboose Park. We went a little further than that, but that's the length of the trail that we have been looking at title information for. Yeah. So I thought just a brief overview of the key parts of the trail. The 30% design plan and the concept plan, they all start in the park in Waitsburg. And the connection point would be to the sidewalk at the north end of the bridge that crosses the Touchet River there. So that allows for a connection down into Waitsburg. And the trail continues to the east, where there would be a trailhead in this section of Waitsburg's park before we get to the port's railroad alignment, and we continue west. There's a drainage swale here, and you'll see in the 30% plans, which we can flip through in a second, that the trail and that drainage will occupy the same space. So there's some culverts to be installed there to allow for the continuation of the existing drainage. And then the trail continues through fairly straight sections of the railroad until we get to Huntsville. So at Huntsville, I want to zoom out, but I know it's hard to see, so I won't. At Huntsville, we get to a part where the railroad is adjacent to some industrial uses and the airfield. And the steering committee, based on some input before the 30% design plan, but input that we heard and the steering committee heard at some of the open houses before we got to 30% design, and some concern from the adjacent property owners. Originally, the trail was planned to be on the north side of the rail here, and it would have been adjacent to those users. And what the steering committee decided based on the feedback was to relocate the rail within the right of way further to the north. Again, when we jump onto the 30%, you'll see that, so that the trail could be between the rail line and the highway, away from the industrial uses, away from the airfield, and essentially buffered by the rail line, instead of putting those trail uses immediately adjacent to that industrial use. So then the next point, kind of dragging us along Google Earth, we get to the first crossing of the Touchet River. So there's a pedestrian bridge proposed and some lookouts there at the river, which is just to the west of the state park. So as the trail continues, you'll see in the 30, so here's the state park. So in the 30% design plan, you'll see a trailhead here. We've had multiple meetings with the state parks department and the steering committee, and one of the state parks department employees is on the steering committee. And so that trailhead is a proposed combination between state parks and the port. The trailhead is partially on the port's right away, partially on the state park land. And they were really happy to work together to make that a reality. The next kind of thing of note or area of note is we come right in front of Dumas Station. the trail will be basically right up against the winery building there. And you'll see on the 30% design plans that the winery building is in the port right away. So there's some concessions to be made there. Just kind of keep going down the right away here into the next. Fairly straightforward through this portion. So the Valley View homes here, we're running past there and creating a connection into Dayton. This is all port property at this point, and this is all Blue Mountain Station future development area, which we're going to talk about in a little bit because we've looked at that. So the 30% design plans show the trail coming around the siding, along the, staying on the north side of Blue Mountain Station and continuing into Dayton. They jumped the tracks to avoid some interesting improvements here around the port right away, and then they come back and we get into Dayton. 30% plans show the trail down the north side of Commercial Street all the way until we get to our second crossing of the Touchet River with a pedestrian bridge, and then connecting into Dayton. There's some improvements along Commercial Street with a trailhead at Caboose Park. And that's kind of the high level trail improvements. I can stop sharing this and go to, I think what I'd like to do is go to the landscape plans. Ken, and you can talk about some of the character and the trailheads.
And we will talk about Dayton more.
Yes, we
in
will.
a few minutes.
I said a lot of in the 30% design plans about Dayton. Yeah, sorry, my computer is being slow.
Everybody can see the screen. So in the, from the design charrette, as Brian mentioned, the whole planning process was identified that there were a number of trailhead locations, one in Waitsburg, one at Lewis and Clark State Park, one Blue Mountain Station, and then at Caboose Park in Dayton. So 4 locations were identified as trailhead locations. And in that charrette process, there was also discussion of what the character and style of this trail and these trailheads should be, with an eye to management and maintenance, and what the community as a whole, what that represents. Because when you do these types of projects, it's a representation of your community and, you know, the conditions that you have. So at Waitsburg, it was important, and the key element of that was to connect with the downtown area. So tying in with the highway and the new bridge, or reconstruction of the bridge, and that downtown core was very important. So that's why the termination, we'll say, is at the end, but also recognizing the old mill was important because of the historic context of that and the elements that were in that location. So the trail stays south along park property and works its way to the mill site, and that's the actual informational context or portion of the trailhead. But a person in Waitsburg or visitor can access it from downtown and reach that point at this wayfinding point or key spot is kind of now telling the users that here's where this goes, this is what it does. It has that informational element, who the supporters are, all the unique things along this section of the trail. So the idea is that the user has a place to park, the user has accessible restrooms to embark on their adventure. It could be a spot that allows communities for having community functions, whether it's a run or I don't know, bicycle activity, but it's a point where this is where it starts, depending on how you look at it. It could start in Dayton or it could start in Waitsburg, but that was the intention. So then as we progress down, as Brian said, the state park was another wonderful opportunity because the state park and its association with the river have to go back and forth in this,
Yeah,
are related because they're so close in a simple walk. In other words, a person or user recognizes a state park as a function of all community services. And here's a great opportunity to really highlight the state park, but also recognizing that when you get there, where do you want to go? We tend to migrate to the water, the river, those kind of interesting things. And ironically, or just through the process, it's almost a perfect walking distance for a comfortable walk. So making that as a central piece, either go in either direction, was really important. Tying that elements of the of this trailhead with the context of the Lewis and Clark State Park was important. And what we heard from users and from state parks is we want it to mimic the elements that we already have in the state park. We do not want to introduce something new, something unique. And they were willing to take on the management and maintenance of that in exchange for processing the trail through there. They also recognized it served some of their bigger planning processes. They have an expansion, I believe, not an expansion, it's just an improvement to some of their offerings. So this one was located with the parking and the facilities on port property with the idea that it will expand into the future for parks, state parks purposes. So there's a good relationship there, and that those interagency relationships are really important when we get to the funding side of it. But I think as a whole, this is just my observation as a landscape architect and all these types of projects, it's a wonderful opportunity to engage both the communities on each end as a bookend with a great spot in the middle to tell that story. There's a lot to be told, whether it's the Lewis and Clark story.
39 participants.
Person?
I don't know if that includes
Wait a minute.
Zoom or not.
It's okay. So now, Brian, if you want to go back to the bridge real quick.
That was weird.
Are we good? The reason I wanted to jump back to this is because, as Brian said, we have two crossings of the river, and recognizing the importance of the river to the community and to the valley as a whole. So let's face it, we wouldn't have a valley if we didn't have a river. So recognizing that element and tying that same character with both the railroad context and the trail is important, and you'll see that on both sides of it. So trying to tie that fabric or that sense of place is important to that. So that was an illustration of what that could look like, or the opportunities that are there. So the next station then is the Blue Mountain Station. And as we said, as we were looking through all of this process and listening to all the input, the other element that came into play was the Blue Mountain Station and its, what it's for, the business, the incubation, the economic development side of it. It was situated in such a way that we were working with the current conditions that were there, the loop drive, recognizing that it can be expanded into the next business section, but it has the opportunities for a trail user to go to the Blue Mountain Station, embark on the trail, again with signage at this location to go either into Dayton or out to the Lewis and Clark State Park, or beyond to Waitsburg. But it felt it was a good, comfortable location that provided ADA access, an ADA restroom, or the ability to have a facility that can have a restroom service without having the expense of a lot of cleanup and maintenance that goes along with those restrooms. So there's kind of a hybrid at this location that allows basically porta potties. And the reason is it was felt was because then that lessens your contractual obligation or your management and maintenance obligation and turns it into more of a contractual obligation. And you can do that when you have an event. So you can bring the porta potties out for a big event, have them there, they're secure, have it there in the summertime, but then in the wintertime, you don't have to worry about the maintenance and management of the facility. So those were strategic at both Waitsbury and Blue Mountain Station.
Yeah, with the knowledge that there are restrooms at Blue Mountain Station that are already cleaned and open year round.
Yeah.
So
Why
there's
have it
already a
doubled up?
restroom, yeah.
So then let's go on now to Dayton, right? So we have the other crossing, and again, tying that fabric in, as I mentioned, the style and character of the railroad component, because it's so adjacent to it, as well as giving the pedestrians the opportunity to cross safely. And it was recognized in all the design and or charrette processes that there are a number of people walking there, because the end result is really the fairgrounds and the golf course and the downtown core. So that connectivity is really important. Again, coming up with a solution that balanced that character and style was really important in the design. Right now, the 30% shows it on the north side of the bridge, mostly because that's where the property was at. But in the conversations in the last few months
Or more,
or
yeah.
more,
Yeah.
we've been talking about going to the south side. We have property on the one side and the city has property on the other side, so it makes for a very good connection. It also ties in with the commercial street development that was produced in 2011.
11, Commercial Street corridor
So
plan.
commercial street, if you're not familiar, they had a planning process where they wanted to develop commercial street and create business-friendly economic developments, and this trail connection ties into that very nicely, where it terminates at Caboose Park, which in essence is the museum. So there's a nice connectivity along that whole section that really brings the city of Dayton and the port together. So there's another good agency cooperation. And again, I tell you that today because that really becomes important when you think about funding and how we're going to implement this. So we can design it. That's what's been contracted. Now we got to figure out how we should build it and what segments, which we'll talk about later. But this is a merger of that commercial street plan with the business district and the Caboose Park and the museum relocation, parking and the walkway. And again, it enhances the parking along Commercial Street that's not there today. It allows a trail user to comfortably walk from Dayton, gives them direction on where they can go as far as recreational opportunities, embraces the river, and then continues on with the excitement of leading on to Blue Mountain Station. It's a shorter walk, or on Fairgrounds or Lewis and Clark State, which is why it was felt it was a very good economic stimulation for the area.
Well, and we should point out that the Smith Hollow Schoolhouse they were
Yeah.
really interested in the trail, which is what caused us to even really think about putting the pedestrian bridge on the other
South
side.
side, yeah.
So they asked, yeah.
Right.
Do we have
Last one, Ken, we got the,
Caboose Park?
yep.
So when we terminated Caboose Park, one of the challenges is the railroad itself, the active track is so close to the museum. From a Department of Transportation and multi-use trail standpoint, it gets very close. So we were able to put the parking on the one side, have it very controlled where it goes to a central location point that would be an opportunity for that big description and definition of here's where it starts in Dayton. This is the centerpiece. And then control those users going to the west along the trail side. So you got parking on the north side, the trail itself is on the south side where it's adjacent to the park, and then continues on. And if the bridge then, as we're contemplating moving it to the south side of the other bridge, it lines up very nicely with the school and really fits that commercial street improvement plan that was adopted by the city in 2011, I believe. Is that right, Jen?
Or shortly after. The plan was done in 2011 and then the city adopted it.
Adopted it. Yeah.
I don't know if it was that year or the next, but it is part of their.
Part of
plan.
their park plan or city plan.
And And the task force did that plan, the
Yeah.
downtown group.
Any questions on anything that I presented from the commissioners? Do you have? No. Can I have you break? To give you an understanding of the character. Yeah. Okay.
Would you like to step through sheet by sheet on the 30% plan, or would you like to have an opportunity to look at that on the port's website? Okay.
So I've seen it on the.
Okay.
If anything hasn't changed from that, and if there is, just.
That's what he's gonna show you now, yeah.
Yeah, we're gonna talk about the changes.
Okay.
Are we doing
I
that now, or
figured
is that?
yeah, no,
I think it's a little further
Yeah,
down, right?
Are we
Yeah.
premature there? Should I nod in?
no, you're good.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
You wanna share yours?
Yep. Okay, so I'm gonna share my screen again. And I'm gonna talk briefly about the design, the public meeting that we had and kind of the feedback we had, and then a little bit more about and some of the community concerns we've heard, and then about maintenance and money. So I don't know if people have been able to watch the design meeting, but we had really good representatives and input during that meeting. We had 2 representatives from Whitman County. They have their own Parks and Rec department, and they manage the Bill Chipman Trail, which is the one between Pullman and Moscow, and then also Kamiak Butte. And those 2 probably had the best information as far as I was concerned, answering questions that day. We asked them about homelessness and encampments and all kinds of things. And really, they said they didn't have trouble with it. The only place they had trouble with homelessness or encampments were within the city of Pullman, where they already do. So it didn't add any, it was just it seemed to be the same issues they were having. We talked to him a lot about spraying and litter control and kind of how they manage that. And so the maintenance plan that we have is based on a lot of the numbers we got from them about the true cost of spraying and litter control. We had representatives from the Centennial Trail which is Spokane. It was interesting because it's a 30-mile trail that's taken 30 years to develop. Was very unpopular at the beginning, but has turned out to be very popular now. And a lot of entities in between that help take care of it. Palouse to Cascades Trail and Columbia Plateau Trail are very, very rural. They are managed by state parks. So we also got input from them on costs of how they maintained it. We had a gentleman from the WSDA pesticide compliance program. There was a very good discussion on the spraying of pesticides along the trail and how it might affect adjacent landowners or users. And for the most part, the spray is not supposed to be drifting on other property anyway, so the trail doesn't really change it. Where it might change it is there are some pea crops and some things that are grown that have a much more, I don't want to say toxic, but a more, a chemical used on them that you need to be more careful with. So we asked the people in Whitman County what they did, and they said some days they closed the trail if they had to. If somebody was going to spray, they closed the trail and they worked with the adjacent landowners closely to not try to interfere. So they didn't interfere with what was happening. So that was really good input from that gentleman. And then finally, we did have the Columbia County Sheriff on that day, and we asked him about patrolling the trail. And he said he already patrols the railroad right of way because people are walking on it all the time. So it actually, yes, they will, if they are called, they will respond on the trail. And we asked him whether or not the existing trail along the dike increases drug traffic. And he said no. He said it might have been used by somebody, on a bicycle trying to get away or something, but it hasn't changed, anything for the people along the trail as far as he knows, is the way he put it. These are some of the community concerns that we have heard, and was one of the reasons we had some of the speakers that we did at the spring meeting. And we have worked very hard. I give Anderson Perry credit for working very hard on researching, safe crossings and driveways and how to limit negative interactions with adjacent landowners. You can only be so close to the rail line without a fence. So there are many parts along the trail that there would be a fence. All kinds of things like that we'll be able to see some of them are in the 30% plans, we'll be able to see in the final plans. And so I can't share all of this. It's just too much. I mean, that was a 2-hour meeting. So I wanted to show where on our website, hopefully most of you are aware, but we have a Touchet Valley Trail page, and all of these are live links. So you can watch that meeting in which we had the people from Pullman and other places, and executive summary of the 30% drawings. They are there. So there's quite a bit of information here. And then the questions that we had gotten from the public, we took those questions and went and tried to find answers that made sense, or tried to, you know, if something we can't answer, say that's something we're gonna have to address if we construct the trail, like the spraying. So there should be some good information there if you're interested in looking at that further. And then I want to talk about maintenance a little bit. We did develop one of the steering committee members helped develop a maintenance plan in coordination with the other trail maintenance folks. And so this is just an estimate. The state uses WCC crews. I can't remember what that stands for. Does anybody remember what it stands for? Shoot, I can't remember what it stands for, but there are crews that will come and do work like that for government. So that's what they use for spraying. Garbage pickup, that means like going and picking up garbage cans at a trailhead, not litter, but just emptying the garbage cans. And restroom cleaning, that was an estimate based on having all of the trailheads. Litter pickup is much of it is done with volunteers, but there is a little bit of a budget there for helping to pay for that. And then miscellaneous repairs is very vague. Obviously, you can see that, you know, $5,000 to $10,000 a year. The first year the trail's built, you're not going to have that because it's brand new. But then as the trail gets older, you'd have more. So the estimate's between $15,000 and $25,000 a year. If there were big things that happened, like the trail is 25 years old and it needs to be repaved, that would be probably go try to get funding to help pay for that again, rather than that's what the Centennial Trail said that they did. They go and they have a Friends of the Trail group that helps raise money and helps to leverage when they go for grants or other funding to help maintain. And the rail operator is supportive of the trail, and he believes that would help with maintenance of the right of way, you know, because he's in charge of that right now. So he thinks it would be helpful to him. And I did want to address this. We've heard a lot about taxes. I would like to point out this little tiny pink sliver here is the port for all the county taxes. This is how many taxes we receive right here, little tiny sliver. In the 63-year-old history of the port, we have never asked for a tax increase. Other than the 1% allowed by law, we have never asked for a tax increase. If we were to do so, it would have to be on a ballot. We would not be allowed to do that without placing it on a ballot. It's never been considered part of this project. It is normal to use existing taxpayer money to pay for parks. Parks do not make sense for the private sector to do. That's why we have parks. If we have a park, it's because a government is helping fund it. And Columbia County has no parks. There are no county parks at all. We're one of the few counties in the state that doesn't have one. We also have revenue other than taxes. I'll show you that in just a minute. And so if you're concerned about taxpayer spending in Columbia County, you might head over to the road department or the county current expense, or talk to the state, because they're the ones that are using up all our tax dollars, not the port. And then I want to show revenue just to reiterate that just a little bit. So this is from our 2022 budget. We have a $470,000 estimate of taxes that we will collect this year. And the rest of all of this money here, it's about $296,000, is private rental revenue. It is from private businesses that pay us rent. And if you could, as you can see, building number 1 at Blue Mountain Station, we get almost $34,000 a year in private rent money. Building number 2 that everybody still thinks is empty, $31,000 in rental revenue, not tax revenue, rental revenue. So there is plenty of money also besides taxpayer money in the port's budget to pay for things. And as you can see, we leverage grants and loans a lot to get our work done. We don't have any new loans, but I'm going to show you some of the existing loans that we have. Then I wanted to show on our expense side how we have a maintenance section. Maintenance is part of what we do every day. Just today, I talked to Barkers, and they're going to grade the industrial park this week or next week while it's still moist. So we have a budget for maintenance of port property in general. And remember, I talked to you about the marina earlier. Here's the line item for the marina, $20,000 budgeted each year. So if we were to build the trail, there would become a line item in the budget for trail maintenance, and that's how it would be paid for. And we would leverage volunteers, state park, whoever is willing to help us, we would leverage that. Where's that money gonna come from? Well, I wanted to show this. This is the current debt service that the port has. This industrial park that we're in right now was built with the port borrowing money or getting money from the state to extend infrastructure. That's how we have all these buildings, the water, the sewer, that's how it all got put in. It's taken about 30 years to build and it's all paid for the most part. But since I've been here, about 15 years, we borrowed some money for the land to buy the new land at Blue Mountain Station. This industrial park is just about full, so we bought new land. That was a 0% loan. We borrowed money. It was half grant, half loan to hook up to the city sewer. This is a bond it's a revenue bond for the transportation building. This is a revenue bond for, we got some money from the state to build the Artisan Food Center, but we had to finish covering the costs. So that's a small loan for that one. This is a bond that we got to remodel the industrial building number 2 for the USDA Service Center. And then the last one was when the private developer decided he didn't want the second building at Blue Mountain Station anymore, and we had first right of refusal, so we purchased it. And my point in showing you all this is that you can see when these debts start to be paid in full. So by 2026, if we were to apply for money and build a trail, it'd be about 2026 by the time we were ready to maintain it. There would be 11 plus 50, there'd be $61,000 in debt service that we're paying each year right now that would be freed up. Obviously, some of that needs to be used for the investments that it was used to construct, but there's no reason that a portion of it couldn't be used to maintain the trail. And let's see, I guess that's it for that part. Back to you.
Back to me. So I already mentioned one of the public feedback and adjustments that happened before we got to 30% plan, which is the decision to relocate about 2,500 feet of existing rail line there in Huntsville to locate the trail further from those industrial uses. So that's a good example of where we took feedback from the public meetings, and the steering committee decided that the best option in the trail plan was to move that rail line. And so that's what made its way into the 30% plan. I need to share this. I'm looking at it. So one of the feedback items we and the steering committee heard a lot about after the 30% plan was Commercial Street in Dayton. So I'm not sure if I can zoom in and make this much better. Nope. Okay. Where my hand is, this pink line, that's the bridge across the Touchet River. Obviously, the fairgrounds are here. So the red line is what is in the 30% plans for the trail location. It was an alignment that the city of Dayton staff, who was on the steering committee, was highly in favor of. And so that's the route that was shown on the 30% plan. It was basically a redevelopment of Commercial Street to have the travel way of Commercial Street closest to the railroad tracks and building a 10-foot trail on the north side of that existing right of way. After hearing all the feedback, what the steering committee asked Anderson Perry to do was to look at some alternate routes to get from Blue Mountain Station to that bridge location. You can see the blue route is basically the south side of the commercial right of way that would have put the trail south of the railroad between these industrial uses and the railroad. There's a strip of land there that a trail could fit in. And then the third option would be to come down Cottonwood out to Main Street, the highway, and extend the city's current sidewalk bike lane situation further to the west till we got to Blue Mountain Station, and I'll show you a figure there. So after looking, and then the pink items here were kind of other sub options. The pink line here at the Touchet River, is we already somewhat discussed, was the schoolhouse was interested in the bridge being on the south of the existing railroad bridge. The railroad bridge is at the very south edge of the right of way. So when we had originally looked at the plan, we looked at putting the pedestrian bridge north of the railroad bridge because that's where the port's property was. If the schoolhouse is willing to deed some land over so that the trail could end up on the south side of the railway bridge, then that became an option that we started to look at. And then the other pink line here was to keep part of the red or blue alignment, but bring it down Wagon Road. But what the steering committee ultimately decided and voted on was for us to look at this green route. So having heard the input, and the steering committee kind of went back to the drawing board, and we are now looking at what it might look like to bring the trail a different route in Dayton. Instead of staying along the railroad, stay in city or DOT right away. And I will bring up a little figure of what that might look like. So this is a figure. Let me see if starting at Blue Mountain Station of how that might look along the highway, by putting the path at the north end of north edge of the highway right away, and separating it from the highway with landscape until this is quite a few pages long, but until we get into the actual city of Dayton, which is about at Wagon Road, where it turns into downtown Dayton is already a 6-foot walk with a bike path. So it would be continuing the city of Dayton's current street section with pedestrian lighting and bike lanes and sidewalk tied. And so you can see we're tied into what is the existing improvements now, providing some improvements on the south side of the street so that you have bike lanes going both ways and sidewalks going both ways until we get to Cottonwood, where we would come back up and hit the bridge alignment that we've talked about before. So this is one example of how the steering committee has taken some of the input that we got from the public meetings we've had and tried to readdress some of the routing and some of the location of the trail to incorporate that feedback. And I will share with that revision, there's a change to what then the Blue Mountain Station trailhead would look like. Before we had Ken talked about the trailhead up here, which we still would have, but then there's another opportunity for a tie-in to Blue Mountain Station at the south end and another smaller trailhead down near the highway before we tie into that improvement plan that I just showed you. Some other locations, there have been a couple property owners who had asked that the trail be moved further north in the right of way where they're crossing their driveway, or please have the trail cross the driveway closer to the railroad line. Where we've gotten that kind of public comment, we're working on kind of meandering the trail to meet those individual needs where or requests where it's possible. So we have been continually taking that 30% plan and continuing to build on it with details on road crossings and details on grading. We've taken a step back on this Dayton section to look at the concept level. And now we're to a point where we're starting to dive back into design and of this piece and get this back up to the 30% and onward. And with that, I think our intent is to talk about current funding opportunities and phasing of the trail. I don't know that we have anything to share.
Well, we've got this thing.
Yep, okay,
I guess that's on my presentation, so.
I'll stop.
Is there something you're talking about before we show that?
Well,
Or are you showing it?
we were just gonna talk about the funding opportunities, so Ken, maybe I'll turn it over to you, Ken. We had a meeting with state RCO to talk about potential funding.
So the state RCO, every 2 years, they have a biannual, call for projects. RCO is the Recreational Conservation Office, and they are the distributor of monies, both coming from the feds and the state money that's just dedicated to recreation. So it's a competitive process where all communities submit their needs and a project that they're doing, and then they review it, the state reviews it, and then if they rank high enough, they fund the first, I can't remember however much money they have at that biennium. So it might be the first 15 projects. If you're in that top 15, then you get your funding and proceed forward. This year, the RCO application deadline is May 3rd. And so to have that, there's a step process and you have most of the work done. But one of the processes, the agency that's leading it needs to have a resolution that they're wanting to go after these grants. So that's important to be on your to-do list. That application also needs to have drawings that are about 30% and a true cost estimate. So when they start going through the process of all the applicants, they look at how detailed it is. They look at the needs base, and needs is huge. So Jenny, the conversation about no parks in the county is huge. That is one of those they'll look at with very favorable opportunities. There's the pricing, like I say, is it consistent with the current dollar values and those kinds of things. So it's important just to have, basically you have your process in place and you submit the application and it goes through this process. The good news on all that is you can use other funds to match. It is a match. So they're generally, we'll just use for talking purposes, a 50% match. But if the needs assessment is greater, you can get it down to a 10%, and they match the 90%. But we were having conversations with the grants administrator for this region when we had that conversation, and she hasn't gotten back to us, I don't believe, on what that match is. But right now, we're just saying 50%, if that's something that the commission, if you want to do. Like I say, the application deadline is the 3rd. It goes through a whole process through the course of the summer. You won't know until fall, maybe even the first part of next year. But then once they told you you received the dollars, then they're your dollars, and you don't have a limitation on spending any time. But that's kind of how that RCO process works. And it's specific to trails, it's specific to parks, and specific to water access. So there's lots of little things. I will tell you the interesting thing about it is they're expecting that when you build these things like the marina, it will stay that recreational use in perpetuity. So when you go to apply for that, you can't apply, get the money, and then change your mind. It doesn't work that way.
And one other thing she told us that was very good news was that the funds we've used for design can
Yes.
be used as match.
Totally not. Yep.
So I was surprised because
Yeah.
that's not often the case. Usually if you've spent them, it's not matched, but they said they were matched. Yeah.
My experience with them is they don't care how you spent the money, as long as you get a recreation opportunity out of it. And that's what they want to do. And at the end of the day, they're trying to get that throughout the state as a whole. Not all focused in one part of the state.
Then we're going to talk about the DOT.
talk a little bit.
Okay,
So the funding that Jenny had talked about at the beginning, that's funding the design was through the Washington State Department of Transportation pedestrian and bicycle funding program. And so in 2018, so 2 funding cycles ago, when we applied for that, that's where the design money came from. There's a call for projects again, that's due May 30th of 2022. And typically their grant program would be about 18 to 20 million. This year, they're calling for a total funding of 56.7 million. So it's about 3 times bigger than normal. So the DOT is encouraging us to put in an application. Typically, they would be a $2 to $3 million project since due to the funding size. And I think we're going to talk about phasing next and what general costs are for different phases of this project. But this is a grant where there's no match required. It's state funding only, so there's no federal guidelines that we have to follow. It's state money, and they ask it by the $2 to $3 million range. Can obviously provide a match, something like the RCO could match it if we wanted to go with a bigger project or not.
And you can use them with each other. You can use DOT money to match the RCO money and all that.
There's no guarantees on any of these funding sources, but the state has supported this project through the WashDOT, through the bicycle and pedestrian funding program in the past, and so they're encouraging us to apply again.
And the part of the caveat on that is the alternative transportation routes and the safety issues. And so in my mind, the Department of Transportation has looked on those very favorably. So this one has that ability because you are connecting these communities, small communities where they're recognized communities as a whole, but you're connecting them. That's really important for that funding piece.
all right, the fun slide. So here is a potential phases and costs. And I need to say this right away, and I hope everybody will hear it, is that you can't add these together because some of them overlap. So you can't just add it up and say, oh, the total cost is X. It's some of them overlap. So go ahead, take it away.
I'll take it away. So when we prepared the 30% plans, we also put out a 30% estimate, which was $10.2 million or so. I think everyone realizes what the economy's done and how construction prices and things are going and gas prices. So the data you see up here reflects current market prices plus projecting to next year, because we're talking about funding down the road. So the total project estimate right now is $12 million. What the steering committee discussions, what we've talked about is what are some logical ways to break up the trail and what might be the best first phase. So some of these phases, Caboose Park in downtown Dayton to the Valley View housing, which is just west of Blue Mountain Station, is about 1.6 miles. The total trail is 9.7 miles or so. So that was one chunk. Within that phase, there is commercial street improvements. There is a bridge crossing the Touchet River. There are 2 trailheads, one in Dayton and one at Blue Mountain Station. And
So that price is for if it stayed on Commercial Street and didn't go to Highway 12 in the city of Dayton?
I adjusted, that is adjusted for the, if we move it. I made
okay.
an estimate for what,
Okay,
for the new route.
okay.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons this was picked as a phase is because of the large number of people that walk to town from Valley View Trailer Park. They're on the railroad right away all the time.
The next selection was Blue Mountain Station to the state park. That is approximately 4.2 miles and has the least amount of big ticket items. There's no river crossings. There's no commercial street improvements, etc. So you can see the column on the right, it has the least expensive cost per mile. Because it includes 2 trailheads, a few minor water crossings, but mostly 4.2 miles of asphalt. And then the next section is, excuse me, the state park to Huntsville, which is approximately 2 miles. It includes 1 trailhead at the state park, but also includes the relocation of that section of 2,500 feet of rail line there in Huntsville. So that's why that price is where it's at. And then the last piece or chunk of the project is Huntsville to Waitsburg. That includes a trailhead and also the large culverts that need to happen to allow the trail and the drainage area just east of Waitsburg to occupy that same space. And Huntsville, there's some port property there that is just to the east of the grain elevator. So the reason the discussion at Huntsville is there would be, if that were the termination point, there could be a temporary trailhead or design of a smaller trailhead there that would function as sort of a phase break. So what this does is it kind of gives 4 different around $3 million projects, which is roughly what the DOT said would be in the ballpark of what made sense for their pedestrian bicycle permits.
Did you, I'm sorry to interrupt, did you say what the max was on the RCO? Because I can't
Oh,
remember.
I did not, so RCO's max is 3 million total, but a match, right? Oh, it's 3 million, but they're highly recommending you don't ask for all 3 million because you'll rank pretty poorly because they've got so much to do. So they're saying give you something.
Their recommendation was to ask for about 1.5 to 2.
Okay,
And then a 50% match makes it 3 million. But you can ask for up to 3 million.
and you said DOT was about 3 million, was about what would make sense to ask for, right?
They don't have a cap, but that was their recommendation, was $2 to $3 million.
All right.
You can ask for all 56.
So you got 4.5 to 5 is really between the 2 of them.
Yeah, I would
If you're gonna try to go for both of them.
Yep.
And these funding mechanisms only come open every 2 years.
Yep.
They're not every year,
Yeah.
so, okay, right. Very good. Anything else?
I think that's it.
Yep.
I think it's questions from commissioners.
Do you want me to leave anything up here or do you want me to stop the share for your questions?
You can leave. Well, I will leave it up for now.
And so we're not, this is just for information and to answer your questions. So
Yeah,
anything you got?
one
Fire away.
quick question I had, what's the cost difference approximately for moving to Main Street from the original in Dayton? So moving the trail to Main Street, doing sidewalks all the way up to Blue Mountain Station, how did that?
They were roughly the same price. I didn't get into a huge detail yet because we aren't that far along, but because so much of Main Street is already sidewalk and bike lanes and whatnot, the amount of asphalt and trail improvements for the piece that we need there is roughly the same length of what was going on in Commercial Street. So they were, when I did the calculation, it was roughly the same cost.
Even including fixing Commercial Street? Because remember that what we were proposing or what the city wanted, we would have had to fix Commercial Street.
Yeah, but the Commercial Street, the amount of asphalt was roughly the same. So it's
To go on commercial.
What'd you
Right.
say?
Commercial a little more direct of a route.
Right.
So the
Oh,
trailers
okay,
and-
okay, so there's the trade-off, okay.
Length wasn't the right word. The amount of asphalt was roughly the same, and the amount of curb was similar, so it turned out to be roughly the same.
Okay.
In the ballpark.
Do you have is there an estimate on that for the distance of the track is proposed to be moved in Huntsville? Footage wise?
There is, off the top of my
I
head.
think Paul's here. Paul DeDelius. Oh, do you remember the distance of track that we were proposing moving at Huntsville?
It was, well, I know the distance.
Oh, what did you ask?
How far it's going to be moved to the north?
Oh,
How many feet north it would move?
Yeah, approximately.
I think it was about 20 feet.
Good.
I think that's about.
and that doesn't have to happen. It was done to try to create a barrier between
And it's
that and the industrial area.
Probably in the addition to the 30% that we're working on, just without looking at it. I don't-
Actually, it's in the 30%, isn't it?
It's
It
in-
shows in the
It's
30%.
in the 30%, yeah.
Yep, do you want to see
Yeah,
it?
Nope,
Okay.
I'll go back to it.
Paul provided a cost for rail relocation by length, and it's about 2,700 feet. So I believe the cost of the rail relocation was 560,000 or so. If I remember correctly.
Hmm.
So just a maintenance kind of question. What happens if we have significant flood damage to the trail? And how is that going to be addressed and covered? And I know that we had some damage along the tracks and whatnot, and if something happens to it, if we don't have, budget for significant repairs for flood, what happens then?
So, and I'll just use our experience from the Centennial Trail, and other trail systems, the Coeur d'Alene, every year. It really doesn't damage the trail themselves much because they're just a piece of asphalt. It depends on the extent. At the end of the day, it's Spokane Centennial Trail. They literally just broke and clean off the silts and things off. That's not to say that it wouldn't undermine and cause it, but it's no different than side of a road or something like that. So, it's really a pretty low concern, and it's actually a good use in a floodplain because it just is so.
But to answer your question, if it happened, we'd have to go find money to fix it.
There's
Yeah.
two ways. FEMA can
Yeah.
look at it depending on the value, and then you throw it all into that, pot, because my suspicion would be others, like the railroad and the trail and other things. And that might get you that value where FEMA kicks in, but you'll find over time, and they've done that in Spokane. It just takes so long to get reimbursed for that, but you can get it. The other one is that it's just, like you say, you just take care of it depending on the damage and extent of it. Again, that's our experience for my physical experience, but observation for the Centennial Trail and the Coeur d'Alenes. And but the one that really probably gets most is the Hiawatha Trail, because it's such high area.
Right.
So really, it's from a flood standpoint, it's pretty safe.
I guess I just want to say, I've been on the steering committee since the beginning, since 2018. Just having finished a long distance bike ride have got me enthused into cycling. So I have been on several trails before. It's something that I just wanted to do. I didn't have the technical expertise that so many of you did, but I was there listening with my mind as to what a cyclist would want. So I've been part of this discussion, so I really don't have any questions, but thank you for the presentation.
I don't have anything further right now. Thank you for your time and energy.
I got a couple more little quick ones. Why did we choose the location between Waitsburg and Dayton to put a trail? I mean, I'm not saying that trails aren't great and whatnot, but why was that location chosen as opposed to, say, a trail from Dayton up to Bluewood or something along the Snake River or other recreational opportunities we have? There's really not much between Dayton and Waitsburg, except for we own a right of way there. So let's put it there because we own it. I mean, there's a state park there and it crosses the Touchet River, which is unimpressive at most time of the year. So I'm just curious why this particular location was selected as the best location to put a trail in our region.
Well, from the port's perspective, it's because we own the land and because of the economic development aspect, because of the two towns, the downtowns. Yeah, that was totally my interest. That Blue Mountain Regional Trails Plan looked at trails everywhere. There's a huge plan. But it is, going up to Bluewood, going out to Starbuck, going clear out to Lions Ferry. There's all kinds of trails planned.
Right, that's
Yeah.
kind of what I'm getting
Oh,
at.
there are.
Why
No,
did we
they are.
choose this one to start with, you know,
Be-
and why are we putting our eggs into
Because
this basket here?
because we own the land and because the people that were part of that planning process chose it. Yeah, so public input,
That's what
yeah.
I'm curious.
Yeah.
Was it the highest rated?
It
or
was
one of
the high, no, it was the
rated?
highest rated in the region, yeah. But I think, you're sure, a lot of it has to do with ease of,
It's connected.
It's the most accessible to the greatest amount of people.
yep, could,
Handicapped people, people with
Yeah.
kids.
So
yeah.
This
We're not-
trail,
we're not having
a little
coffee.
perspective, the Centennial Trail when it started, it was very short, I mean, it really was, I think, from downtown to Gonzaga University, which is less than a mile.
Mhm.
And then it was expanded to the next leg, and then the city, before the city of the valley, but the valley acquired some railroad property and it was expanded to that. And so these things, they build upon themselves. Now it's expanding in Washington State, it's expanding north into the west to connect Riverside State Park with the city's infrastructure. And so each and every year, you kind of start with one little piece and then you try to work it all the different directions. And it may be that there's a piece here and a piece over here because it was really challenging here, and then those come in later and slowly fill in. But
Right.
that trail, as Jenny said at the beginning, it's taken over 30 years, but it is a significant part of both Coeur d'Alene and Spokane. And when you look at any of their economic development and or their, why would you come to this region? It is always on top. And it is very loved, played with hard, but it's very loved. And it's where the people are. It's what it starts with. So,
Yeah,
it's a good
and
question.
We have
yeah.
over 5,000 people here. though.
No, I
we
understand. Yeah.
Well, but we're trying to invite people to come.
No,
I mean, my
no, I
sister,
get that.
yeah, my sister and her husband are trail tourists. They go do the Hiawatha Trail and,
Mhm.
so it means they go to the town, they spend the night, they
Well,
go
there's
to
some really
go to the
great trails
restaurant, yeah.
around the state. There's no denying that. I was just curious of the attraction of between Dayton and
Yeah.
Vicksburg.
Well, there's another thing I want to say is that some of us would not be very interested in riding up to Bluewood. Whereas we would ride the flat trail to Leesburg because of our physical ability. We also discussed whether or not to allow electric assist bikes. That was a big discussion. And it surprised me, but apparently they are used a lot now. And like one of the DOT guys that was on our committee said, that's how he and his family can cycle together, because then his wife can use the electric assist when she needs to and they can all keep up. So we even though it's non-motorized, there would be, I think electric assist bikes would be allowed.
And the last question I have, Jenny, is kind of more for you, and it's in regards to our budget. And you're pointing out that we would have, excess money once these curb loans are paid off. But in looking at our 22 budget, our revenues are, well, $817,865, and our administration expenses are $895,000. So we're operating in the red as it is if it wasn't for the grants and whatnot that we're using to cover our tails. So where does this extra coming from? Because I'm not seeing it in the numbers here.
From the debt service.
Mhm.
Yeah, from the debt service. Yeah. I'm gonna have to look at a budget, because what you're showing is, I'm gonna have to look at it, because we do not, the only operating on grants we do is the ADO money. That's it.
Because the numbers are just, that's what they're showing us, the budget I'm looking at, the 195,360 in administration, general and professional, plus we still have almost $200,000 in maintenance, capital and improvement projects, plus our loans, so.
370,000 of that is in architecture and professional services, which is for trail design.
Mhm.
So if we weren't designing the trail, we wouldn't have that 370,000 in expenses.
When you take the 227 for debt services and the maintenance and capital improvements and add those together, it still comes out.
I'm gonna have to look at it and show you how it goes, because I am not operating us in the red. So I will show you when I have it in front of me, because I don't. Okay, thank you.
And that was my last question.
Very good. I guess that's it. Thank you very much for your presentations, all of you three. Johnny said, thank you for your questions. I think we can adjourn.
Thank you guys
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. It's like if I do have something that hurt me done. Thank you. Question for you.
Oh, okay. I did get it. You do that? Can I do that another time? Oh.
We've had those discussions with the state park. They would
Yeah.
move the adjustment.